Hola, bienvenidos a su canal de YouTube Español en Casa. El día de hoy vamos a continuar con esta serie de videos en inglés que estamos produciendo como parte de una nueva lista de reproducción con el objetivo de que más personas lleguen a este canal y que nuestra comunidad crezca. Ya somos 30.000 suscriptores, así que pues la idea es que lleguen personas que tienen como lengua materna el español, pero que están tomando un curso de literatura, de poesía o de elaboración de ensayo en alguna universidad europea o estadounidense y lo están tomando en inglés. Entonces la idea de estos en vivo van a ser de enseñarles, darle tips sobre el tipo de tareas que pueden ustedes estar enfrentando en este momento si estudian en estas universidades. El objetivo también es que, bueno, como comunidad crezcamos. Yo les he comentado que estamos valorando la posibilidad del año que viene crear un segundo canal en inglés, totalmente en inglés, pero tenemos este proyecto piloto para ver también cómo responde la comunidad ante la producción de contenido en inglés. Así que, como siempre, les pido su apoyo, su like, su suscripción. Eso hace la diferencia, y compartir estos videos en sus redes sociales con personas que estén aprendiendo español o que estén aprendiendo inglés y que en este momento están elaborando ensayos, que siempre es el talón de Aquiles de la inmensa mayoría de los estudiantes. Aunque yo les digo también que si saben hacer ensayos en español, va a ser muchísimo más fácil hacer un ensayo en inglés, porque la teoría es la misma. Así que hoy precisamente les traje el ensayo de una de mis estudiantes de tutoría. Lo vamos a leer porque siempre la mejor manera de aprender es precisamente leyendo. Y ese es el otro consejo que les doy. No se puede hacer un ensayo si ustedes no leen buenos ensayos. Y no es por darme publicidad, pero ustedes saben que en mi canal hay 45 ensayos, hay 45 videos dedicados justamente a la elaboración de ensayos argumentativos, de problema-solución, de causa-efecto, sociológico, psicológico, contraargumentativo. Hay de todos los tipos, así que bueno, no hay justificación. Pero sí, vamos a estar sacando contenido en inglés para ayudar también a esas personas que ahora pues están enfrentando un reto. Recordarles que, como siempre, ofrezco un programa de membresías si ustedes quieren recibir asesorías personalizadas conmigo para que yo los acompañe de la mano en la elaboración de sus ensayos. Lo único que tienen que hacer es irse al botón unirme al lado de suscribirme y seleccionar el nivel de membresía que desean. Hay diferentes precios: el precio de 99.99 que les da acceso a 5 clases al mes, el precio de 249 que les da acceso a 10 clases y el precio de 399 que les da acceso a 5 clases. Estas clases son vía Meet, totalmente personalizadas, no son grupales, así que lo único que ustedes tienen que hacer es hacer el pago y enviarme un correo para que nos pongamos de acuerdo con el horario, porque sí, recuerden que yo vivo en Managua, Nicaragua, Centroamérica, y muchas veces tenemos una gran diferencia horaria. A veces son 2 horas, 3 horas, a veces son 20 horas. Entonces es bueno también que nos pongamos de acuerdo. Los pagos se hacen vía YouTube, que es una plataforma completamente segura para ustedes y para mí. Así que bueno, los invito a integrarse a mi programa de membresías y pues ser parte de esta bonita comunidad. Como siempre, le envío saluditos especiales a los patrocinadores de mi canal. Tú puedes convertirte en patrocinador donando $2.49 al mes, $14.99 al mes, $34.99 al mes, y cualquiera de esos niveles te puede ayudar a apoyar simplemente la creación de contenido de este canal. Bueno, le mando saluditos a Janet, al planeta de Abraham, a Rodolfo, a Noé, a Miguel, a Hipólito, a Orlando, a Onida, a Arelis, a Verónica. A todos ustedes que envían donativos todos los meses, les agradezco muchísimo la confianza. Bueno, también nuestro comercial de siempre. ¿Qué tipo de asesoría brindo? Ya saben, elaboración de ensayos, análisis crítico de obras literarias, redacción de párrafos, edición de textos, creación de poemas y pues probablemente el nivel más caro, que es ser su tutora de tesis, aunque no es por el tema que más me buscan sobre todo por el tema de hoy. ¿Cómo puedo hacer, profesora, un ensayo en inglés? Y eso es precisamente lo que van a aprender hoy. Primero, creo que es desmitificar que es súper difícil, imposible hacerlo, porque van a ver que sí es posible. Otro consejo que les doy antes de iniciar a hacer el ensayo es leer cuidadosamente la instrucción. ¿Qué quiere la profesora en ese ensayo? Específicamente en el que vamos a ver hoy, que lo vamos a leer y vamos a ver el uso de citas directas e indirectas, la instrucción decía claramente que había que definir qué cosa es una historia de hadas. Había que hacer una breve introducción y definir qué cosa es una historia de hadas y hablar un poquito de background sobre las historias de hadas. Obviamente hay que empezar como siempre con un buen título y todo ensayo, muchachos, no importa el idioma, si es en danés, en alemán, en lo que sea, tiene que tener título, introducción con tesis, un desarrollo con párrafos, una conclusión donde mencionen nuevamente la tesis y una lista de referencias. Eso es para todo. Entonces, vamos a comenzar. Fairy Stories, a way to give women a new voice. Okay, that is the title. Now we're going to continue with the introduction. Fairy stories have survived to this day as part of an oral tradition that was recorded in writing with the birth of printing. Originally, they were stories that include fantastic and moralizing content, since they were born as a way to transmit wisdom from generation to generation. According to Castiao Vicenzo, the fairy tale was first a simple, imaginative oral tale containing magical and miraculous elements and was related to the belief system, values, rites, and experiences of pagan people. This is a direct quote, and because we have less than 40 words, we have to use question mark, as you can see here, right? And remember that you need to add the page, okay? It's in page 1. I'm missing the last question mark here. On the other hand, fairy stories were a gender that was born within the female universe. And this is very interesting for me because it's new. Since women were destined for the private sphere. Telling stories among them was a way of having a voice in a heteropatriarchal and androcentric society. In this regard, Hannon Patricia, 1998, point out, and now we have another quote. It's a direct quote, but because we have more than 40 words, it's in a new paragraph with indentation and without question mark. It's widely recognized that the 7th century public remarked fairy tales writing as woman domain, inseparable from the feminocentric salons that nurture. Both modernists advocate of women tales such as the Mercure and detractors such as the Clegane Villers understood the fairy tales to be a female gender, though to have been transmitted by grandmothers and governesses, the fairy tale was an eminently female gender in the 7th century consciousness. Page 6. Si ustedes ven, ¿no? Hemos hecho una introducción, hemos definido qué son las historias de hadas, pero también hemos dado una información importante. Y es que las historias de hadas nacieron en el universo femenino porque las mujeres se reunían en los salones para contarse historias. O sea que las historias de hadas realmente en su origen no eran contadas por los hombres, sino que eran contadas por las mujeres. Luego lo que pasó es que debido a varios proyectos educativos hubo grandes compiladores de estas historias de hadas como los hermanos Grimm, pero que fueron los compiladores más no los autores de estas historias que iban de generación en generación, es decir, de madres a hija o de abuelitas a hija y así sucesivamente. We're going to continue. In fact, fairy stories were originally recited in private rooms where women gathered to tell this story and share them. And that is why many of these stories include advice on marriage and courtship, issues that concern women on their time. Fairy stories also allude to the dangers that women could face in the forest, in the city, or in remote village, and try to alert girls and young women to sexual predators. In this essay, it will be made an analysis of the fairy tales The Bluebeards, The Story of Grandmother by Unknown, and Tisalee and the Marino, since they include several pieces of advice to women. This tip responds to the time and context in which they were written. Therefore, the rewriting of this moral will allow a more feminist approach to the stories. However, it is important to mention that although it may not seem like at first glance, fairy stories were a form of female empowerment, since women were able to address their own problems and make their concerns visible. For this reason, in the 3 chosen stories, an analysis will be made and a rereading of them will be proposed, in such a way that curiosity is a reward and not a punishment, that the cunning of a girl turned her into the heroine of her own story, and that a victim is resilient enough to rise, like a beautiful flower from her own ashes. So as you notice, we made an introduction, and now we are stating our thesis statement that actually is this one. For this reason, in the 3 chosen stories, an analysis will be made and a rereading of them will be proposed, because that is the idea of the essay. Try to propose a new way of read this kind of story that, well, we know that we're born in a male context, in a context that men have the power, but nowadays that is changing, fortunately, right? So now we're going to move on to the body paragraph, okay? The first of this story is the blue bear. It is said that there was a man who has a blue bear. I'm going to explain this. In the essay, you have to select or pick 3 fairy tales. And in the essay, you have to make a brief summary of each of these fairy tales. Then you need to explain what is the original moral, and then you have to rewrite the moral. So for that reason, I have to follow this kind of structure. Okay, so I'm going to continue. The first of this story is the blue bear. It is said that there was a man who has a blue beard. This man instilled fear and rejection because of the color of his beard, but at the same time, he was very, very rich. The man became interested in the daughter of a neighbor. None of the sisters want to marry this man since he has many wives which has mysteriously disappeared. However, after a long courtship and an invitation in which the man offered them parties, dances, and feasts, one of the sisters agreed to marry him. Initially, everything seemed to be going well until one day the man had to go on a business trip. He told his wife that he would give her the key to all the doors in the house, to all the trunks, including those containing gold and precious stones. He told her that she could open all the trunks except for a cabinet whose little key he also gave her. Como si la mujer le fuera a hacer caso, ¿no? The woman was very curious, and when the husband left, she decided to open the cabinet. In the place were all the bodies of Bluebeard's previous wife. Okay, he was a killer, right? Which has been terribly dismembered and whose blood filled the whole place. She was so terrified by the scene that she dropped the small key that opened the cabinet, and it was covered in blood. Although she tried to clean the blood, she couldn't, and when her husband returned, he immediately realized that his wife has discovered that he was a murderer. The man flew into rage and told her that he would kill her for this wicked curiosity, but the women begging him to give her a few minutes to pray to God. The man agreed, and the woman climbed the tower from where she waited from her brothers to hear the news and come to rescue. Fortunately, the brothers arrived in time and pierced the evil man with a sword, killing him immediately. Nada para niños, ¿no? At the end, the woman kept her husband's money and married a good man. So as you notice, we're explaining a little bit about the original fairy tales now. Now we're going to move on to the original moral. The original moral of this story is that curiosity causes displeasure and therefore women should avoid it at all costs. No matter what happened, a woman should not give in to her desire to know information that doesn't benefit her. It is better to remain ignorant so as not to discover things that are unpleasant. This story also indicates that a woman is more cunning than a man, and therefore, even if she tried to dominate and contain her, she will always be more intelligent than him. The woman in the story managed to emerge victorious from the discussion because she knows how to manipulate the situation in her favor. According to, part of the instruction is to mention a rewriting model for a peer. So according to my colleague, the rewriting model of the story could be this one. Women should follow their intuition at any cost. Women have their own freedom to do what is their own best choice. If what is chosen is what one believes in, then they should follow that belief. In the end, the curiosity and power of one was nothing but a succeed. So the partner is trying to propose a new moral, a more inclusive moral, right? This means that contrary to what the story tells, curiosity can be a strong tool from women since they are cunning and very intelligent. Although it was originally curiosity that led the woman to open the cabinet, it may have saved her life in the long run, as her husband may have planned to kill her. Therefore, by rewriting this moral, it can be given a different reading that helps empower women. Curiosity can lead us to a better life as long as it is executed intelligently as the protagonist of the story did. So we're trying to propose a new way to read this story, right? The second story is the story of Grandmother by Unknown. This story is about a little girl who is asked by her mother to bring bread and milk to her grandmother. The girl set out on her way to her grandmother's house, but on the way she met a cunning wolf. The wolf asked her which way she's going to take, and the innocent girl tells him. The wolf, who wanted to eat the girl, quickly went ahead and came to the grandmother's house and ate her. When the girls arrived at the grandmother's house, she did not suspect what had happened. But luckily, a little cat revealed the truth to her. Already alert, the girl saw that the wolf had disguised herself as her grandmother, so when he asked her to take off her clothes and throw them into the fire, the girl was really distrustful. She also began to notice that the big bad wolf had a lot of furs, big nose, shoulders, and a big mouth. So when the wolf asked her to lie down on his bed to eat the girls, she asked him to let her out for a while. The wolf allowed her, but put a thread on her foot so that she could not escape. But the girl, who was very intelligent and brave, let go of the thread and tied it out to a tree trunk. This allowed her to run away from the big bad wolf. The original moral of the story is that there are plenty of wolves out there, but people who want to hurt children are always around. The big bad wolf represents sexual depredators who want to take advantages of the innocence of children to deceive and manipulate them. In ancient times, the grandmother told this kind of story to the children because there was a lot of dangers in the village. Therefore, with these stories, they could alert the girls and young women of the danger that were outside. My partner rewrote the moral in this way. I'm sugar and spice and everything nice, But what about when I'm not? You seem to assume I'm a scared little girl, but fear is something I have forgot. I will eat you up and spit you out. So tuck your tails and run, for big bad wolf who eat little girls. Forget, I have a gun. So next time your stomach rumbles, I suggest you change your path, because my wolf-skin coat could really use a hat to match. If you notice, the partner that is part of a discussion board proposed these rewriting models. And now we're going to explain how, with these rewriting models, we can propose a more feminist point of view. With this model, my partner wants to change the focus of the story a bit and empower women. The new model states that girls and women can be their own heroines and defend themselves against predators with their cunning. This version of the story doesn't have a saber, but the protagonist herself, with her talents and cunning, managed to get out of the problem. This means that women don't need to be saved by a man if they are strong enough and brave to save themselves. Women are not weak, on the contrary, they are strong, determined, enterprising, and brave. And that represents this new model, a woman who can be the heroine of her own story, because in this story, actually the little girl is able to go away, right, and be safe. The third story is Tisalay and the Marino. The story is about a man who has a daughter. One day, the man have to go to the grass on another piece of land with his wife and daughter, but the daughter did not want to leave because she liked her house and her neighborhood. The mother agreed, but told her to be very careful of the marimos that could come to the house to eat her. The girl told her, "Don't worry," that she would not open the door to anyone. After a few days, the mother came to visit her daughter and brought her food. For the girl to recognize her mother, she sent her a song, and so the girls opened the door. But a marimo realized that the girl was alone and wanted to trick her. He appeared in front of the door and imitated the voice of the girl's mother. However, she noticed the deception and did not let him in. Then the marino decided to take an iron hoe, heated in red hot and swallowed to clear his throat. Then he came back and tried to trick the girl again, but he was unsuccessful. Then he decided to heat another burning brand and swallow it again. He went to the door of the girl's house and spoke to her again. She fell for the trick and opened the door for him. The marino put in the sack to eat it. But suddenly he felt thirsty, so he left the sack in the care of some girls. The girls looked into the sack and saw Tisalane in it and ran to tell their mother. The mother took her daughter out of the sack and replaced the content with a dog, various scorpions, a snake, broken pot, and a stone. When the marino came back, he opened the sack to eat the girl, but then the dog jumped out and bit him. The viper bit him, and also the scorpion. A stone and broken pot hurt him, so he ran off and fell into a pile of mud, transforming into a tree shortly after. The bee made honey in its bark, and the girls took the honey to make cake. That was the final of the evil marino. The original moral of the story is that a girl or young woman can never open the door to a stranger, especially if she is alone, since this stranger can hurt her. The moral of the story is geared towards warning young women of the dangers posed by strangers who can harm them. In the play, Tisalay is smart, but not smart enough to escape marimo deception. The final message is that girls are always vulnerable to adults and can be abused by them. Furthermore, since Tisa Lee is kidnapped, it is possible that during this time, the Marino sexually abused her. The moral proposed by my colleague is the following. A beautiful flower blooms by bright in colors and has gorgeous petals. The lovely came to an end when a bad wind ruined the flower. The flower was destroyed. No one picked her from the ground. They passed by and she blooms brand new. Know that it's not your fault for what has happened. Know that you were the reason for the unexpected actions. Just now you will bloom again, grow stronger, physically and mentally. Before the horribleness comes out to the unexpected, know to never trust what comes ahead. The new moral proposed a different rereading of this story. Although the girl was indeed tricked and kidnapped, it doesn't matter the difficult time she may have suffered. Tisa Lee is strong enough to get out of any physical or emotional abuse. A rape or psychological abuse is a strong trauma, without a doubt, but it's possible to move forward with family help and therapy. Yes, maybe Tisa Lee was swelling as a woman, but that doesn't mean she's no longer beautiful. She has the strength and resilience necessary to get ahead and overcome the blows of life. In addition, she has her mother on her side. Her mother on her side, so she will not be alone in the recovery process. As a beautiful flower, Tisa Lee is going to shine again. So as you notice, this is a new moral, a new rewriting of the story, because in the original story, the protagonist was abused. So the idea of the new moral is try to understand the abuse and try to provide some good word, right, to the victim. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the third part of the essay, that is the conclusion, and finally the words cited. Okay, to conclude, it can be said that in the fairy tales, the Bluebeards, the story of Grandmother by Unknown, and Tisa Lee and the Marino, it is evident the concern of mothers and grandmothers to alert women and girls about the danger of the war. This danger can occur as a result of their curiosity, giving personal information to strangers, or opening the door to a man. However, it is possible to rewrite the original morals and give them a feminist reading. There are many dangers in the world, it is true, but also women are cunning and intelligent, and they can get out of this danger with ingenuity. It is true that sexual predators exist, but women and girls can escape these predators and become the heroine of their own story. Finally, it's true that girls can be manipulated by adults, but it's also true that they are strong, resilient, and determined. So no matter how hard the trauma is, it is always possible to get up and move on. The rewriting of this moral allows us to have a more feminist, more human, and fairer vision of women, and to deconstruct the stereopatriarchal system and the androcentric society in which we have lived for decades. Only by recovering a new voice, the women will be able to obtain equal treatment and live the private fears in such a way that they will never be silenced again. In the past, fairy tales told from women to women were a form of resistance against their inability to belong in the public sphere. Therefore, reading fairy tales nowadays is a beautiful reminder that the right to speak is not expected, but rather earned with sacrifice, intelligence, and imagination. And finally, we have the words cited. Remember that in the words cited, you're going to include all the documentation that you recover in order to write down this essay. Remember that in the essay we have question, we have actually direct quote and we have indirect quote. For that reason, in the words cited, you're going to include all the information in order to avoid plagiarism. If you notice, in the first one, I need to put the last name, that is Tatar, and then the name, that is Maria, 1998, the classic fairy tales, and then the URL. If you notice, I'm using the entire name. This is because in this specific essay, the students have to use the MLA format. And that is one of the difference between APA format and MLA format. In APA, we only have to add or to write the M, for example, right? The initial. But in MLA format, you have to write down the full name. The same happened here. Di Castillo Vicenzo, 2011. The meaning of fairy tales within the evolution of cultures. And then I have to use the URL. Entonces, como pueden ver, muchachos, aunque escribir un ensayo en inglés es un reto para todos nosotros, porque no es nuestra primera lengua, sí es posible hacer un ensayo en inglés. Para eso lo que tienen que hacer es leer información y seguir siempre la misma estructura que sigue en un ensayo en español, haciendo un título, colocando una introducción con una tesis que luego va a ser desarrollada a lo largo del ensayo. Tienen que seguir las orientaciones de la maestra. Por ejemplo, esta profesora pedía que se definiera en la introducción qué cosa es una historia de hadas. Luego ella pedía que eligieran 3 historias de hadas, que la resumieran brevemente, que explicaran la moraleja original y que luego propusieran una nueva moraleja. Por eso así está construido el ensayo. Y finalmente que todo el ensayo ayudara a tener una visión feminista en las lecturas de las historias de hadas, que por la época en que fueron escritas, pues relativamente son algo machistas. La conclusión, si se fijan, está bien estructurada porque efectivamente le da un espaldarazo y vuelve a mencionar la tesis, ¿no? Que la idea es que las mujeres no son personas débiles, que pueden ser las protagonistas de su propia historia, incluso después de situaciones traumáticas. ¿Qué es lo que le pasa a la tercera protagonista de la historia? Volvemos en la conclusión a mencionar las 3 historias que estamos reseñando. De Bluebeard, que sería Barba Azul, la historia de, aquí le ponen The Story of Grandmother, pero esta es Caperucita Roja. Antisaley and the Marimo, que eso sí es una historia que no conocía, pero que es una historia de hadas. Entonces, luego que hacemos ese recordatorio de que estas son las 3 historias que vamos a analizar, pues simplemente explicamos por qué hacerle una moraleja diferente y leerla desde una perspectiva feminista puede ayudarnos a todas las mujeres a empoderarnos, ya que estas fueron historias que nacieron en un contexto, obviamente, en que lo que querían las abuelas era, como el entorno era muy violento, en ese tiempo pues las mujeres normalmente vivían encerradas en las casas porque había mucha peligrosidad. Entonces eso es lo que se pretendía con esta historia, es que ellas se cuidaran, no le abrieran la puerta a extraños, que si iban a un lugar no le contaran a nadie su destino final para que nadie las raptara, las abusara. Eso es lo que se esconde detrás de las historias de hadas, porque mucha gente cree, la historia de hadas es para entretener a los niños. Nada más lejos de la verdad. Ha sido Disney realmente quien ha alterado estas historias originales que lo que contenían era una gran sabiduría popular, pero también como nacieron en una determinada época, pues sí, hay que decirlo, que eran historias machistas. Entonces este tipo de trabajo lo que persigue precisamente es que el estudiante sea capaz de leer estas historias, desarrolle su pensamiento crítico y haga ensayos coherentes. Siempre, recuerden, con un título, una introducción, una tesis que van a probar, un desarrollo, una conclusión donde hagan un restatement de esa tesis y el words cited. Si a ustedes se les hace muy difícil hacer esto, recuerden que en el link de la descripción les dejo el imprimible de este ensayo para que ustedes lo puedan revisar, pero si necesitan mi ayuda para apoyarlos en la elaboración de la tesis, de los argumentos, en la normativa APA, porque recuerden que hay que diferenciar las citas directas de las indirectas, siempre les ofrezco mis servicios. Pueden unirse a mi programa de membresías desde $99.99 al mes. En este programa precisamente lo que yo voy a hacer es ayudarte. Cómo tú, sin manejar el idioma, puedes ser capaz de hacer tus propios ensayos y que estos ensayos sean coherentes, tengan cohesión y pues estén bien escritos. Se mira difícil, pero esto es un tema de práctica. Y créanme que mi primer ensayo no era en inglés, obviamente era en español, pero solo con el tiempo uno va adquiriendo la agilidad. Lo mismo, o sea, mi primer ensayo en inglés me costó mucho trabajo. Y fíjense que yo no soy una nativa del idioma, sin embargo, a este nivel ya puedo hacer ensayos. Entonces, eso es lo que les quiero demostrar, que sí es posible con esfuerzo y trabajo y en algunos casos con el apoyo de una tutora como yo, lograr hacer ensayos de calidad para que no repruebes ese curso en la universidad. Les mando un beso y un abrazo, los quiero mucho y me encantaría que me dejaran saber en los comentarios si conocen alguna de estas historias. Bye bye.